What is up, YouTube? Logic and Liberty here. This is my first time recording a video specifically for my YouTube. It's going to be a 20 to 30 minute summary of the political happenings this week. I'm so glad to have you here. Please consider subscribing. You can also follow me over on TikTok if you want to see some political live streams and political content throughout the day. My goal here is to absolutely turn you into a political nerd, so stay tuned. All right, the first thing we're going to chat about is the Canada-US tariff trade kerfuffle that happened earlier this week. The week is February 2nd. We're going to cover again multiple things that happened this week, but we're going to start with Canada and US. So Trump, as we know, implemented 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. That went into effect on Saturday, February 1st. Trudeau and the Mexican president were able to meet with Trump, and they came to some type of agreement where those tariffs will be delayed for 30 days at this point. And the agreements were all related to the border. So the Mexican president committed to, amongst other things, giving 10,000 more soldiers at the border, in addition to their 15,000 solely focused on fentanyl. Trudeau is committing to a lot of the things that they had made an agreement on in December, but I think now we're going to be done in a more timely manner with the tariff threat being presented. And listen, I know Canadians are very upset with Trump and the Americans right now. This approach to foreign policy and the way that Trump is doing this is new. It's not status quo. I think it makes people very uncomfortable. I can understand that it rubs people the wrong way. What we have to understand is Trump was hired by the American people to secure our borders. Bottom line, that was a huge reason why people voted, and that is what he is aiming to do. We know that President Trump is transactional. We know he's a great negotiator, and so he is leveraging the United States economy and other nations' reliance on it to get some people to come to the table and do things that benefit Americans. So whether or not you agree with his approach, I would hope that Canadians at some point can understand that we have a leader who is ultimately looking out for Americans' best interest. Again, people are going to disagree. People are going to say it's not worth the tension that we've created between the United States and Canada, and I get that. I am hoping that this tension is temporary, that it will eventually smooth over. Again, I don't know. I talked to many Canadians this week, and they're not happy. Some understand it, and some are like, hey, we wish we had a leader that would be willing to go to bat like that for Canadians. But there's crazy videos going around that the United States is preparing to invade and annex Canada. I've seen no solid proof of that, nor do I think that will be happening. So for now, the tariffs are paused for 30 days. I'm hopeful that they can continue to have good conversations and come to a resolution where the tariffs will not have to be brought up again. That's where we're at with Canada and the United States. Now, the other big thing that was all the talk this week was DOGE and the USAID office and the insanity that was exposed from DOGE and the USAID office. It's interesting to me. There's been a lot of energy from the left against Musk. They believe that it's abhorrent how this is being done, which is, again, it's interesting because I would be more concerned with the wasteful spending and some of the things that our tax dollars were spent on versus how it's getting done. President Trump has designated Musk to this task, and he is carrying this task out, and he is exposed quite a bit. And mind you, we're going into the third week of the Trump presidency, and he is going line by line. We're on the first department, y'all. And this is the kind of stuff that's been exposed. So we better buckle up because it's only going to continue. Okay, so as we talk about the USAID and all the stuff that's going on there, I want to play a clip from Senator Kennedy. We had Senator Kennedy speaking. This was a topic on the Senate floor. It was a topic on the House floor this week. And I think Senator Kennedy kind of summarizes this fairly well. I genuinely appreciate his takes, and the dude is just funny. But here he's just going over what Trump and Musk are doing, and I'm with him. I don't understand why the left is so angry at this approach. There has been a lawsuit filed by a couple unions who represent federal workers in regards to concerns about the Privacy Act and Trump not abiding by the APA. We'll see what happens in the courts with that. Scott Bessent has come out and said that there's only read-only access. I do think that the Trump administration could have done a little bit better job with communication as far as who had access and to what, just to put the people at ease, and there wasn't just, all this runaway with fear-mongering and people getting all worked up. But ultimately, I believe this has to be done. Whether or not you agree with the approach, we have to acknowledge the government spending is out of control, and we will continue to just absolutely bury ourselves in debt if we don't address it. And the way we address it is we expose it, and then once you expose it, you can go back to holding people accountable and these departments accountable for how they're spending. I mean, we can look at $6.3 million to study men having relations with other men in South Africa. $8.3 million for equity and inclusion education, $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gender language. I understand the original intent of USAID, but if it's not going to improving the infrastructure or, helping them to provide for basic needs, I would rather our tax dollars not go to these things. I don't think that's improving the life of the citizens in these nations that we're sending this money to either. So it just seems like a joke at this point. But let's hear what Senator Kennedy had to say. It's just about a 2-minute clip.
I want to try to put in perspective what many of my Democratic friends have been talking about today. They're very, very, very upset at President Trump. And they're very, very, very upset at Elon Musk. President Trump ran for president on a number of issues. One of the issues he ran on, he said it almost every day. He said, if you elect me president, I'm going to go through the entire budget and review all the spending, line by line. If I heard him say it once, I heard him say it 1,000 times. And that's what he's been doing. He went out and appointed, through an executive order, Elon Musk, who some people like him, some don't, but he's not a dummy. He's a very successful business person. He's got a top secret security clearance. President Trump issued an executive order, and he turned to Mr. Musk, and he said, Mr. Musk, I want you to do for me what I said I was going to do in the election. I want you to go through all the spending, line by line. Now, let me ask you something, Mr. President. How are you going to review the spending without reviewing the spending? How are you going to audit the spending by an agency without auditing the agency? That's what I mean when I say common sense is illegal in Washington, D.C.
I can't say I disagree with him. So we'll see what comes of this. Again, the level of spending that's been exposed is crazy. I am filming this on Super Bowl Sunday, and it has been rumored that Elon Musk has taken about $40 million out for Super Bowl ads to help promote DOGE, expose spending. I don't really know what to expect, but I'll be tuning in to watch those. So when we talk about how important it is, I believe, to expose all of this, it just goes back to my point has been, why are we advocating to give the government additional revenue when we can't even get a handle or basically understand how they're spending it now, how they're currently spending? I mean, there's no way that I'm going to say, hey, let's tax people more just to tax people more, because we already know that these funds aren't being used to promote the national interests of the United States or its citizens. So I think there's going to be a whole lot more to come as far as exposing wasteful spending. I'm grateful for it. I think it's necessary. I'd like to shrink the size of the federal government. And most importantly, I'd like to shrink the national debt. We can't keep pretending that this is monopoly money. And I can understand, and I feel like the critiques of the approach can be reasonable. However, if you're disregarding or diminishing the insane, irresponsible spending of the federal government, I'm probably not going to take you as seriously. So, all right, so let's move on to the executive orders from this week. My favorite, and something I have been so passionate about for the last 7 or 8 months, ever since Biden updated Title IX to include gender identity, is the banning men from women's sports. And so that executive order, let's pull up the information on that here. Just one second. Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports executive order was signed on February 5th. And it says in the very first paragraph, by the authority vested in me as president of the Constitution, as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and to protect opportunities for women and girls to compete in safe and fair sports, it is hereby ordered. And then it goes on to talk about the fact that it's demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports when we're allowing men to compete in women's sports. It references Title IX, which again was created in 1972 to eliminate discrimination based on sex, increase participation, and encourage participation from women and girls in education in the United States. And so he says no males in women's sports. And what's fantastic about this, and I think is so important, is the NCAA, within 24 hours of this being signed, changed their policy from allowing males to participate in women's sports to no longer allowing any males in women's sports. So We know that in all of the school-related sports activities, it will be women only, women and girls only. And so a huge win. I'm so incredibly grateful. I don't care if it's 1 or 1,000 transgender athletes. A female losing a spot on a roster to a male is unacceptable. I don't find it to be okay. And I will push against it every step of the way because women and girls deserve to participate in sports fairly and equally against someone of the same sex, because we know and we recognize males have a biological advantage. That's undeniable. So, great executive order. I was super excited about that. And another one which hasn't been talked about as much, and I'm going to do some more digging on this, to be honest, is the plan to establishing a United States Sovereign Wealth Fund. And this one is interesting. I would encourage you guys to go read it. It was signed on February 3rd. And it says it is in the interest of the American people that the federal government establish a sovereign wealth fund to promote fiscal sustainability, lessen the burden of taxes on American families and small businesses, establish economic security for future generations, and promote United States economic and strategic leadership internationally. It directs the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce in close coordination with the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy to develop a plan for the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund consistent with Section 1 of the order. Now, I read a few articles on this because I found it interesting. I hadn't really heard of a sovereign wealth fund prior to this point. And no wealth fund, it doesn't make sense to try to start a wealth fund as if we have excess funds when we have a $36 trillion debt to address first. So that's one of the critiques of it. Additionally, other sovereign wealth funds have failed. An example is Malaysia, who borrowed to fund their wealth fund, their sovereign wealth fund, and ultimately was confiscated by government bad actors. So it exacerbates rather than addresses the country's fiscal imbalances, notwithstanding Trump's claim that the fund will promote fiscal sustainability. This is from an Axios article called Trump Sovereign Wealth Fund, published on February 6th. So just an interesting one that was thrown in there. Again, I don't feel strongly about it. I'm not sure I understand the need. I would have to hear Trump speak on it, but that one kind of caught me off guard because I didn't really expect that type of executive order this week. There was also a national security memorandum on Iran with new sanctions and action to isolate Iran from the international community. And then there was withdrawing the U.S. from and ending funding on various UN organizations and reviewing U.S. support to all international organizations. So essentially, the executive order dictated that we will be ending funding to UNRWA, UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, which we funded with $153.7 million last year. The executive order alleges that this organization, or this division specifically, has been infiltrated by members of groups long designated by the Secretary of State as foreign terrorist organizations. And the division's employees were involved in the October 7th attack on Israel. So those were the big executive orders, kind of the big happenings this week. Again, overall, there's a lot happening. If you're a political content creator right now, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Again, I'm recording this on February 9th. We aren't even a month into Trump's presidency, and we've seen a lot happen. And you can see a completely different approach from President Trump. I hope that the transparency continues. I would like more transparency. Complete transparency is what I'm for. I would like to see us continue to try to shrink government spending, expose how taxpayer dollars have been just straight up abused up to this point and not really accounted for in a way that they should be. And so we'll see. I hope that going forward, Canada and the US can come back together and just be buddies again. I don't know. The Canadians are quite angry. There's a lot of them who are angry. And again, I'm not diminishing how they feel, but I also do understand this is going to upset the status quo. And that is what Trump will do and will be doing for the next 4 years. And that's exactly why he was elected. So I hope that people understand that. But if you guys tuned in this long, thank you so much for being here. I will post these weekly, probably on Mondays from the previous week, so you can just get a little download as to what happened. And I will be back again next week to give you a summary and my thoughts on the crazy political happenings, because there will be plenty to talk about again this week. So stay safe and stay nerdy.